once again by the very lovely LD, not in this format, but a new format for us to be together. We are joined for the first time by Maso Perez, designer of Boyfriend Dungeon, the official TTRPG for the game. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to uh, join us for a chat about a really awesome game, a really cool concept. We're going to talk a lot about the game itself, translating a video game into a TTRPG, the inspirations that come from different aspects of this game and the translation of it, and probably we're going to talk about what weapons we think we would all be. So stick around. This is going to be a fun chat. Like I said, my name is Derek Sword. I use he/him pronouns. I am the sword half of Sword and Key. You can probably guess what weapon I'm going to say that I am. Um,
Don't know.
while
Anyway, that's
LD
me.
is figuring that out, yeah, Musso, if you want to introduce yourself, where we can find more of you, some of your bona fides.
Yeah. My name is Maso Perez. I'm what you call, I guess, an emerging writer in that I haven't gotten enough jobs yet to call myself a professional writer. I I am the designer for Boyfriend Dungeon tabletop RPG, aka Life on the Edge, is the final title that we went with. It went through a few iterations. And in addition to that, hobbyist fencer. I am lifelong martial artist, so a big weapons nerd in general, as well as just trying to get my bearings in a variety of fields. So I've made other RPGs before. I've written short films. I've done a variety of things. And you can find my other works, which most of them are for free, on itch.io, as well as which I'm under Trumoy. And then I also have a Tumblr blog called Trumoy, where I mostly shitpost.
Fantastic.
So.
Fantastic. I've always heard it said that if you get paid for it, it makes you a professional. So I think if you're a paid writer, you are a professional writer. I'm
That's
not
fair
the
enough.
authority on that, but still, if you need to put it on a business card. Great. Well, we're going to talk a lot about, like I said, Life on the Edge and kind of, how you got involved in that, because you are the writer of the TTRPG, not the originator of the video game. So, for those who might not be familiar at all with Life on the Edge, or even with Boyfriend Dungeon, what's your 30-second, what's your elevator pitch as to what the game is?
So the elevator pitch is essentially a video game series and tabletop series where you use your friends to fight your demons. Essentially, it is a setting that is set in the modern day, where strange psychic dungeons pop up, where all of the monsters in them are manifestations of your fears, and there are just people milling about that are what's it called? There are people milling around who can transform into weapons, and obviously, in turn, there are people who wield them. The video game itself, you play as a wielder, and you go on a lot of dates with these weapons, and as your romance grows with them, so too does their power as a weapon. Whereas for the tabletop RPG, everyone plays as weapons, and you take turns wielding each other in a bit more of kind of holistic group.
Yeah, that is something I noticed in the design of the TTRPG, is that it is much more of, I think it even says in the language of it, it's not about using those around you, it's more of a mutual thing. And I really found that to be really awesome. So how did you originally get involved with creating the official TTRPG for the video game?
So I actually originally made an unofficial one. After I'd played the original and just kind of blasted through all of it in like a week or two, I was really enamored with it, and as my brain often does, I hyperfixated on it, and just decided to write an RPG for it, when I realized that it was very similar to an RPG that is very near and dear to my heart, called Rhapsody of Blood, which is originally meant to be a Castlevania-themed RPG. But the creators of it also made an adaptation of it to be a Persona RPG, which is really funny because Tanya, the creator of Boyfriend Dungeon, said that she thought of Boyfriend Dungeon after playing Persona. So there's kind of this little like interplay of different things that relate. But I
love
circle,
that.
I had played Rhapsody of Blood a few years back and really enjoyed it. I thought it was the best tabletop RPG for dungeon crawling, in my opinion. And when I was playing Boyfriend Dungeon and enjoying how the dungeon loop went in it, I thought that a lot of it could apply to Rhapsody of Blood, and it just did. So it was originally a hack of Rhapsody of Blood that later on I got in touch with Kitfox and asked them, like, would you guys be interested in actually licensing this? I could do rewrites of it and things like that. And they said, yeah, that sounds great, because they wanted to keep everybody engaged on Boyfriend Dungeon, because they didn't see anything on the horizon for at least a little while in terms of developing that piece of art further. So it was kind of just a very mutually beneficial agreement. Kitfox in general are fantastic to work with. They're really like, they really give you your space most of the time, and they're very nice people.
Absolutely.
I was never under the impression that I had to like protect myself the way that writers can sometimes feel with most companies. Never felt like that with Kitfox. So
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear that you kind of felt that freedom with it. Going back to like the first time that you played Boyfriend Dungeon, the video game, what was the big thing about it? If you could really pinpoint something that like really made you connect to that game and caused that, you know, if you could find the root of that hyperfixation, what do you think that was?
I think it was twofold in that, one, I was just really, really happy to finally play like a really queer sim day. Like one that still had a high production value. I mean, obviously there's a lot of indie ones that have that are made by one person or something like that that are fantastic and also arguably maybe more queer. But in addition to it being queer, it was the coziness of the whole thing. Like that's something that I feel as a writer, as a gamer, as a variety of different things. I feel like there's a really big push in most art and media to always try to do maximum amounts of drama and tension. And it's kind of exhausting sometimes, because like especially when you gamify it, when you're gamifying like a relationship and it's like, oh, I said the wrong thing and now they hate me, right?
Right.
That's really stressful and annoying. And it doesn't make me enjoy most sim dates because of it. I think I played like Monster High, which is the exact opposite of Boyfriend Dungeon in terms of how it handles that. Monster Prom, that's it.
Monster Prom.
My partner just
that's a
reminded
whole...
me. Monster Prom, it's really funny.
Uh-huh.
If you're playing it as like a joke, it's a great game. But I had so much trouble getting invested in it because it felt like stressful. Everyone was such a jerk in that game, like all the time. And Boyfriend Dungeon, on the other hand, it really just makes you feel kind of like safe for most of it. There's still moments of like tension and drama where the stakes get really high. But part of what makes you feel like you want to see those moments through is the fact that you basically have like a digital support circle in it. So I really liked that.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was very compatible with how I play and run a lot of tabletop RPGs, where a lot of like half of the game most of the time is like just shooting the shit with NPCs. Do you know what I mean? We're not like, we usually don't do meat grinder games in my group of friends where we're constantly killing player characters and things like that. So I just felt like it was immediately compatible, and I really like tabletop game. But yeah, I think it's a very brave decision sometimes to purposely not choose the tense thing in media. And I think that that's kind of unsung sometimes. Like when a character just reveals themselves to be too mature for Hollywood-style drama. I love that. And that was one of the things that helped me fixate on it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Aldi.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you have a particular, this is sort of niche, but do you have a particular character that like Is your favorite from Boyfriend Dungeon one that you found yourself gravitating towards more often? Do you have a favorite? There's a lot of very good characters in that game.
Yeah. It's cheap to say I love everyone, but I
Sure.
do. But
Yeah.
I think that the character that like I was the most fixated on was Valeria.
Well, that's
like she's very well written. I feel like her story is very interesting and very different from most stories you get in video games overall. And her weapon form melted every boss in my path, so I was really incentivized further to keep upgrading her. But besides Valeria, I also really liked Sawyer, and was surprised by a few others. Sawyer's the glaive, the really small bean person that turns into a glaive. And I don't know, I'm always a sucker for like someone that I can kind of be very like I can be the stable thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my like favorite kind of relationship dynamics. Whereas Valeria, it feels more like it's also very equal, and she's such an intriguing character that I just gravitated towards her.
That was definitely one of the ones when you were talking about taking the like. There's a little bit of tension with these relationships, obviously, but the mature path feels like it's setting up more tension than there is, but really it's about when they ended up talking to each other is yes.
Yeah, without giving any spoilers away, like in hers, it seems like it's going to go into this like really melodramatic path, but then it doesn't. And it turns out everybody has like some level of understandable motive, and that's really nice. It's really nice to see.
One of the neat things that you were mentioning a little bit earlier was how it doesn't have to be meat grindery. And you even in the introduction that you have in the TTRPG, it does say that there will be times where you won't be fighting. You may prefer to have combat rare, only for duels to be select with demons or certain villains, because that's another thing we'll touch on. Is this is a very customizable game. But the fights are not the way you get to the next story point, but a story point in and of themselves. And I really enjoy seeing that. I really do want to shout out how accessible this game is, and also how inclusive it really is as well, because for as much as, this is based off of a dating sim, the TTRPG is not really necessarily a dating sim. It can be, but it can also be familial relations. It can be friendships. It's very accessible to any number of people who might want to play. You could play this in a family setting and it'd be perfectly usable as a video game, or not as a video game, as a TTRPG. Or you could play this with a person who might identify as Ace or Arrow, and not really want to have those necessary like romantic sort of storylines. I found that to be really really refreshing about a dating sim that is translated into something. Was there a big push behind that, and kind of the opening up of the story itself, not just limiting it to the Verona Beach kind of storyline that the video game had?
Yeah, so for starters, when it comes to a lot of the stuff about inclusivity and kind of how it's a sim date, but it's not a sim date, that kind of thing, it's actually just a carryover of the philosophy of the game. Throughout the game, there will be options that are like labeled, I think, with a little yellow symbol. And if you click on those, it's platonic options, where you are signaling to the character in the story, I want to be platonic, I don't want to be romantic. And that allows you to continue pursuing a character, even if you don't want to do it romantically, whether that's one character or all of them. And on top of that, in probably what is one of the most legendary things I've seen in a sim date, one of the like options for your romance is actually a cat, and you're not romancing them or trying to start any kind of like romantic or sexual relationship. You're literally just befriending this cat and becoming really close with this cat, and you never have to pick a platonic option, because obviously the whole thing is platonic. So in addition to them allowing people to experience each of the romance routes in a platonic fashion, they also had a route that's solely platonic, so that the character never even comes onto you. And so that was already kind of like, if I wasn't doing that when I was designing this game, it would just be like disingenuous to the fans of the video game, in my opinion.
Exactly.
And in general, I prefer modular game design where everything is very like, the GM can just throw stuff out if they don't want to deal with it, or add stuff in more easily. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, LD.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. That's like one of the key features of the game. And as somebody who identifies as ace and arrow myself, I mean, I love romancing people in video games, but it was nice that I could still get the storyline for some of the characters that I didn't feel romantically inclined towards.
And also, in addition to that, it's one of the few sim dates where you can be as poly as you want. You can date all of the characters simultaneously, and none of them make a stink about it. Which some people would be like, "Oh, that feels unrealistic" or whatever. But it's like, we already have lots of games that cover that ground. We don't need every single game to make you get punished for making decisions and like. And that was part of what I like about it, and part of what I really like about tabletop RPGs. Because once I really got into tabletop RPGs, I played way less video games. Because I felt like a lot of the stuff I was searching for in video games, I was getting more of in tabletop RPGs. Particularly the kind of like customizability and interactivity of the whole thing.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you on that. Because even video games that now, and almost in the reverse of what you did, something like Baldur's Gate, which took a TTRPG and made it a video game, that even has a weird dating sim as quality to it, but you do find limitations there because you don't have somebody who is acting as your game master. Basically, like, kind of, there's going to be limitations to what the writers gave you. It's not going to be as much yes and as you might find in a TTRPG. I absolutely see where you're coming from on that.
And also just sorry, because you made a second point too. In terms of opening it up past Verona Beach, that was largely just due to the fact that in the video game there are no ranged weapons that you can use, right?
Right.
We carried that over into the tabletop RPG, which made a lot of sense because it also means that you're always in the fray. There's always a risk to you while you're fighting something, and that makes it naturally more tense. But that also highlights the fact that it can take place at any time in any setting. As long as the setting can have swords and hammers and axes and things like that, you can always have this type of scenario play out. For another podcast type interview thing that I did, the character creation cast, we actually made our characters for a like medieval witch hunt setting. And it works fine, right? Because it's just all about fears and psychological aspects of the characters and relationships, and then melee weapons. So it can fit in anywhere. I think that Verona Beach was just decided on probably for the game because they really wanted that like romantic aspirational feel, right? Of like being able to just move out to California, not have to pay rent, and just, you know, have a good time meeting people for a while.
I do like the setting-less quality of it, as you mentioned, because the weapons that you are utilizing can they go back as far as humans go. The concept of a blunt weapon, an edged weapon. We'll definitely get into all of them here a little bit, but yeah, you could play something futuristic. You could play it in space. You could dating sim in space. You could do medieval, like you mentioned, or really almost anywhere in the world, because these types of weapons exist. It's just part of human nature to create something that got something that smashes something, short-handed or long-handed or whatever else. Looking actually into gameplay here, because we had mentioned how this game actually does have a GM. You do have somebody who actually is your narrator, your rules person. I didn't want to say rules lawyer. That's not accurate.
Master of Ceremonies, I believe.
Master of Ceremonies. Yeah. Which I love that title. I love a game that gives a title to a GM. So Master of Ceremonies, and then the interesting thing I found about this, you do actually say 1 to 4 players, which you don't often find I'm not going to call it a limitation, but you don't often find suggestion for a max number of players, and I did actually appreciate that, because sometimes tables can get too big.
Yeah.
And if you are recognizing that your game doesn't run as well with multiple people, absolutely great to put it out there. This is a Powered by the Apocalypse game.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 6-sided dice. What was was just Powered by the Apocalypse? I know it's super accessible, but what kind of won out PBTA over any of the other rule settings?
Well, in addition to the fact that I said that, like, a lot of this is based on Rhapsody of Blood, and when we were
Sure.
making the official RPG, we made sure to reach out to the original designer of Rhapsody of Blood to get their blessing.
Mhm.
They were really happy, because I think we're the first like third party kind of adaptation of their game system. So I think if anything they were flattered. But Powered by the Apocalypse really just in general revolutionized how I approach tabletop RPGs in a lot of ways. Particularly though, why it needed to be Powered by the Apocalypse, or at least a game that was heavily inspired by it, was because Powered by the Apocalypse has what you could call asymmetrical rolling, or player-facing rolling is what some people call it, where only the players have to roll. The GM just doesn't have to roll. And
Right.
that does two really good things for the game. The first is it means that the game master can do completely prepless encounters when the time calls for it. So if the
Right.
players go hard right when you expected them to go soft left, then like you don't need to like panic because you don't know the stats for the troll that you thought was just going to be a friendly NPC that they're whacking at. You can just run the whole thing without worrying too hard about it. And the other thing that it does is it changes action economy, which is really important to this game, because in D&D and a lot of more traditional tabletop RPGs, where both sides need to roll dice and they kind of use a very more symmetrical kind of rule set, it leads to this thing where every combat needs to be player turn, enemy turn, player turn, enemy turn.
Mm-hmm.
And that would absolutely ruin this concept, because this concept requires the weapons and the wielders to get turns. And so it would kind of just like gum it up a little bit and make it confusing, because
Sure.
if you don't have the right initiative, then they don't have it, and so forth. Whereas here, we get to have that call and receive back and forth between two people in combat. But now, because only players have to roll, it's wielder roll, weapon roll, or weapon roll, wielder roll.
Uh-huh.
And so that also means that we get to put in this really strong connection of teamwork, where one person's action sets up the next person's action. And it really stresses that connection between wielder and weapon, and that the best players, the best groups who are going to blast through dungeons, are going to be the ones who coordinate really well.
I love that. It
That's very
definitely makes
cool.
it more of a conversation at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've
Uh,
written other games before, or you have a couple of other games up on your itch and the drive-through RPG, correct?
Correct.
Is this your first time working with or writing for like a Powered by the Apocalypse game, or what other systems have you written for?
I have written other systems before, and
Mhm.
I've been developing one or two of my own systems in the meanwhile.
Mm-hmm.
But besides like a micro RPG or two, almost all of my games are Powered by the Apocalypse. I did make a bunch of backgrounds for Troika, because Troika is just one of the funniest things I've ever read. And I just wanted to join into the fun of writing silly lore for it. But although in the past I've written a lot for, it's called the Fusion system. It's a very obscure, old, mostly broken system, but it has one of my favorite RPGs in history, which is Artesia Adventures in the Known World, which is this very like history buff fantasy setting. Where the creator of it, Mark Smiley, is just an insane person who like will hand draw every map and paint everything. Like this, the writer and designer of this game also painted this cover. This is just him. So I was really enamored with that, and that was actually where I first kind of started after like making D&D stuff for my own personal games. That was where I first started like releasing things online. I was the only person making homebrew for the Artesia game. And I ended up inadvertently founding the most popular fan page for it as a result. So that was where I got started. So I actually started in really, really crunchy systems, really like cut your teeth on, like, let's try and simulate as much of reality as possible. And then Powered by the Apocalypse changed my perspective on that a lot. And one of the things about Powered by the Apocalypse is you kind of have to make a game if you want to play that system in a genre that it doesn't already have. But making the games isn't as hard as it seems. And that made it a really good, like, impact. But, like, one of the ones that I have, for instance, is called Lover's Quarrel. And that one is where it's like an anime harem thing, but all of the players in the game play as love, like romantic options, and the GM is the one who plays as the person they're all fighting over. And then it's a Powered by the Apocalypse game, but instead of 2d6, it uses a tarot deck to do the rolls and simulate things.
Love all of that. That sounds amazing.
It's free, so feel free to download it, anybody listening. But like, yeah. I really like to get weird with trying to, I guess, innovate on Powered by the Apocalypse, you could say.
It has such room for flexibility. It's really strong in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like, you know, there's also Forged in the Dark games like Blades in the Dark and so forth, and everything about them. Ironsworn too, that came out more recently, which is starting to get a lot of its own iterations, and it's just completely like changed everyone's perspective on solo role-playing. So yeah, I just think that Powered by the Apocalypse is like a really strong area for TTRPGs to like at least welcome people into. I won't say move in, like we don't need to get rid of other systems, but I really like it. And most of the weekly games that I run now are almost always Powered by the Apocalypse or something adjacent to it.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, trying to think, Monster of the Week is, I pretty sure.
Yeah, Monster of the Week.
Monster that's one of my favorite iterations. Yeah, that's right. Because whenever I think of the two dice. Absolutely. Looking back at your gameplay for Life on the Edge, because you had mentioned, you know, D&D is often, you know, the gateway for a lot of people. So I always try to point out the differences first, is that is a reference point for folks. Your game does use 4 stats primarily for your characters, which I always love seeing those. I love seeing the words that people use for them. So we have Heft, Keen, Sting, and Core. I think those are great. They're pretty self-explanatory. Heft is strength, Keen is grace, precision, your comparison to dexterity. Sting, I love that. Reasoning and perception, and Core is charisma and willpower. What was you obviously limiting it down from the D&D 6 skills? What was the thought behind the 4 of those, and how'd you kind of narrow down to utilizing those 4?
Usually Powered by the Apocalypse games will range between 3 to 6 stats. And when it came to those 4, it always comes down to, when you're designing one of these games, what stats do you need? Because I feel like when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons and a lot of the older, crunchier games, like I was saying, there's a lot of mentality of like simulate everything. Whereas Powered by the Apocalypse is very focused on like simulate what matters to this type of story. And so the stats primarily exist for the dungeoneering. And as a result, you need to ask like, well, what parts of dungeoneering are going to come in? Because unfortunately, we can't talk to these like monsters in here. That's part of the point, right? You have to fight them, because if you didn't fight them, then you could just walk your way through the dungeon and do whatever. And if you're not going to fight them, at that point, you almost don't need to present them as a challenge, but instead just as a conversation. And I already play in a lot of my games. Charisma checks are usually like an optional thing. I usually tend to run it, where I say you don't need to be particularly charming. You don't need to be this or that. You can always opt to roll those kinds of things if you feel nervous about talking in character. But generally, most of me and my friends like to just hash things out in character anyway, and I just won't make them roll. If they make a convincing argument, whether it's like done in group or done because they thought of something really clever, I just let them do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And in terms of like when it came to this, the other thing is like each of these are like clearly somewhat physical in some capacity. Like even Sting, I really like in my games to make accuracy linked to mental ability, not linked to dexterity, right?
Yep.
Because dexterity tends to be a god stat in a lot of games because they just give way too many things to it. And so like the 4 stats here are like how forceful are you, how graceful are you, how clever are you, and how like stable are you is how I would describe core, right?
Sure.
And so like all of those can in theory be used to be charming or to achieve certain things. And I like to usually make it a little bit more released that way, but also just that they're clearly ways that people like to think about fighting, right? Generally speaking, you're going to have people who want to smash through stuff. You're going to have people that want that power fantasy of being like the super graceful, super fast fighter. You're going to have people who want to think their way around it and like deny others the chance to fight rather than actually being good at fighting, right? And then you have people who want to focus more on protecting others than hurting, right?
Right.
And so like that's where the 4 stats kind of came from, and obviously the names from them are to relate to the weapons and the weapon forms, right?
For sure.
And that's kind of where they came from. It's just kind of, I feel like 4 is usually what we could call the RPG constant, right? Is in 4s, where it's like you have the tank, you have the roguey kind of like attacker-y person.
Sure.
You have the controller, and then you have the support, right?
Absolutely.
Tank, damage, controller, support. And so the stats are kind of meant to relate to that so that it's easy to wrap your head around how to play the game and what your character will be doing. So yeah.
Now, I know you said that you've done fencing and martial arts and that sort of thing. What do you feel, what stats do you feel like you are strongest in personally, or what stats are your favorite to play into?
So I'm obsessed with like, I have like a weird mental block about the concept of being fast enough in games. Like strength and dexterity are interchangeable stats in my brain. All that matters to me is like, will my character be moving quickly enough when I'm thinking about how to fight properly? Because technique is usually dictated by something that isn't just stat based. It's like you have to have a skill, or you have to be a certain class in the system, or things like that, right? So my biggest pet peeve, because I first started playing with 3.5 edition Dungeons and Dragons, was I never wanted to play a fighter because they were slow. Because I was always picturing the slow, really bad greatsword from every video game where the guy goes like, and he has to like swing it like that. And since I do historical fencing, even the greatswords as tall as me, you fling them around super quick. That's what makes them scary, right? It has to be quick, or you would die. If you can't recover from a blow, the other guy is going to stab you as soon as you've missed a blow. So I'm always really obsessed with like, I want to be able to picture my character being fast. So if a system characterizes strength characters as like cavemen who smash things really slowly, I run in the opposite direction from it. Whereas most of the games that I play as, strength and speed are tied together more than dexterity and speed are. In most of them. Not in this one. This one, I wanted to give it a little bit more of a traditional kind of like, this is what dexterity is thing. But usually I try to tie those together because that just like explosive power is what strength means to me, right? And as like a martial artist, that's generally what we mean when we say strength. Is like how hard you hit is the same set of muscles as how fast you hit. right?
Sure.
Whereas
That does
like
make sense.
Yeah,
That's how
endurance is a
I
different
feel like
thing.
there's like a physics equation that explains why that is.
Yeah.
Possibly.
But what the other thing I have a mental block with is I think it's part from like the paranoia of being raised in martial arts since I was 6. I have a hard time most of the time playing a character who can't defend themselves. I have to like make that a conscious choice. Otherwise, every character I make as a player character always has like some at least average level of fighting ability in for the setting.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, when you describe the character that's heaving the greatsword over their shoulder, my immediate thought goes to Soul Calibur and like Nightmare, who's just an undead, heavily
Yeah.
armored knight. Yeah, of course they're gonna take hits. You, an average person, no, that's not how it works. And yeah, much to your point, greatswords only weighing a few pounds. People always think that they weigh like hundreds of pounds. How can anybody lift that? But even when we look at that super strong big people, if you look at WWE wrestlers, they're not slow. They're
No.
not slow people. The muscles make you faster. And yeah, LT's point about physics, you have literally like mass and acceleration going together. Yeah, that's how you hit well. So I love that kind of combination, because that more goes into overall physicality as opposed to separating out the physicality like video games and TTRPGs often do, because we want the Bruce Lee to be able to go up against the I just forgot the basketball player's name that he fights in Enter the Dragon. But anyway, the super big guy, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, we want those two to somehow be equally matched, even though they are very different body shapes. But yeah, no, I absolutely appreciate that you can kind of just say like, yeah, you get this big strong guy, you get this lean guy. They are equal, even though they are not physically like they don't look the same, but their stats can still be the same. And yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and part of it also comes back to like the storyteller system was also really instrumental in me rethinking a lot of things, because like those like World of Darkness games and Scion and things like that. Because in those games, those were also the first RPGs I played where combat wasn't considered a mandatory way that you progress your character, right?
Right.
And most video games need to make every single stat something in combat. Like if you watch Dark Souls fans, they'll complain up and down like, why doesn't the luck stat have enough weapons? It's like, because it's the luck stat, dude. It's a luck stat. But the thing is most people have this mentality that like combat is mandatory. You all need to be able to fight in your own unique way, which is how this game is designed, granted. But at the same time, a lot of games also just like kind of changed my view, where it's like, no, combat is a role in the party. There are some people who are the fighters of the group. And then there are other people who are thinkers, and there are other people who are speakers, and those can be separate group members. But when you make a TTRPG like this, which is focused on dungeon crawling, it needs to focus on the combat, right? And what I was doing was I was trying again to break up like, well, what makes a weapon feel characteristically? So heft is like how hard the actual impact is. But like keen, I got from like, well, swords, edged weapons are not wielded with strength in real life. Like they might have a strength requirement, but you would arguably say that they would actually be wielded with dexterity because they're fast and you want to use them against unarmored opponents, and it's more based around your technique than how hard you hit, based for like what the actual damage it will do. Which is why like fencing is a thing in the first place, and it's not a thing for maces because there's a limitation to how much you can do with eye smash, right? And then when it came to sting, the idea was supposed to be like, how deep does it bite? How much does it hurt to be hit by the thing? And part of that was brought on by the energy weapon playbook, as well as 7, where I felt like teaming up tech weapons with being smart just made sense to me. And so the idea of like elemental damage being tied to how clever you are was nice. And I thought sting was a good way to characterize like being smart and still making it sound cool, right? It's like how effective is it? And being smart is usually about like outthinking something thinking of a way to exploit a weakness. Therefore, it's like the critical
knowing
stat
where the
moment.
vulnerable spots are.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then what's it called? Core, obviously, being that it's like toughness, but toughness and support go together more than people might think, I think, in most cases. Like, if you were really trying to face tank something, you need to be like aggressive. You don't need to be defensive. The defensive person is there to scoop you up and get you out of there as best they can, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that they just need to maintain not dying. And since this game ties like the character's welfare to both their body but also their mental well-being, it made sense that the supportive, stable character is both like, you can play them as a tough person, but you can also just play them as a really nice, kind person who's always there for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so, like, they can actually, like, if you have a good core in the game, you can heal people's fear, which is like the mental damage that your characters can take, with just a roll, right?
Right.
And so obviously the people who make you feel comfortable are the ones who are going to be the best at that. So in a way, in this game, Constitution and Charisma are the same stat, because that's what the role in the story is. It's about, what do you add to this relationship?
Right.
So one of
I also just love, I'm sorry, real quick, LD. I just love that
Fine.
Sting is named after one of the most famous weapons in like fantasy as well.
Also
just had to
true.
throw that out there. Yeah. Please, LD. My brain had to get that out.
Oh yeah, no, it's so good. So I think it's really interesting because we talk about combat versus role play. It's one of those things that comes up in TTRPG discussions all and how some people love doing the combat and some people prefer just the role play aspects of things. And I'm personally one of those people who feels like combat can enhance a good combat session can really enhance the role play and enhance the relationships. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about the way that you've designed it with the weapon and the wielder and having to do that for, and building each other, is that I feel like that plays really well into that idea of combat and role play not being two separate ideas as being the same thing.
Yeah. And actually, the selection of how you choose who's who is based around the role play.
Mm-hmm.
So in the game, when you are playing through the dungeon, you have to find the entrance to the dungeon, which is out of dungeon actions. And then once you're into the dungeon, we have it split up between two things: traversal and boss fights.
Mm-hmm.
During traversal, you either all turn into your weapon forms and just kind of fly around the dungeon when you fight, or you can flavor it as, I usually flavor it as, you partially manifest your weapon form and wield yourself, right? And that's almost more like typical D&D kind of dungeoneering.
Sure.
But when you reach the boss, that's like the crystallization of the kind of like momentum of the story, because the boss has to represent what your character is afraid of, or represent someone terrible in their life or something like that. And so whoever the boss is most relevant to, they're the wielder, because the wielder is the one put in harm's way. And so it needs to be the relevant person, whereas the weapon is there to support the wielder. And I had often toyed with, like, even the very first RPG I ever wrote, which I never ended up releasing. It was a game where you played as ghosts. Even in that game, I toyed with the idea of like a player character who can turn into a weapon, but I could never work it out, because like, if you are the only one who turns into the weapon, you're locked into a support role, right? Especially in a game where like the weapons don't get actions. But if everybody is a weapon, you're taking turns supporting each other, which means that the boss fights, instead of them being like the dice decide who gets the spotlight, which is how it can often feel in Dungeons and Dragons. Like, if I'm just rolling super well, this is my boss fight now, right?
Yeah.
This game, it's like, no. You choose who gets the spotlight based on who the boss is. And then the weapons are there to help that character shine, right?
Aww, love that.
It's part of the fun. But obviously the trade-off is that the weapons have more of the actual like playbook mechanics.
Sure.
So the weapon players are never bored, right? But usually when you want to run this game, you want to engage the wielders in a more narrative sense and the weapons in the more mechanical sense. That way everybody has something to do and they're not stepping on each other's toes.
I really like that, and I like that it comes back to a concept that you brought up earlier, how the video game as well as this game is like polyamory friendly, in the sense that you could have one person who is facing, their biggest fear and be surrounded by partners all manifesting as weapons, or vice versa, that you have, multiple people who are maybe facing off against this fear with like a couple of weapons, and it can be you kind of different mixing and matching depending on the scenario.
Mhm.
Um, One thing that I really want to shout out, we're gonna go to break here real quick, but you were talking about the moves that characters have depending on the scenario that they're in. So I definitely want to talk about that a little bit because I really like the way that you break down moves for this game. You almost break them into like the environment or scenario that a character would be in. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So this was another thing about Powered by the Apocalypse that was revolutionary to me is how much of the play sheets are just accessible and right in front of you. Like if you make a Powered by the Apocalypse game and you can't print out the major rules in a handful of sheets, you've made kind of a bad one, in my opinion. Like Powered by the Apocalypse usually has playbooks, and playbooks are characterized by like all of the specific rules for your character are on your character sheet.
Yes.
So when you are a new player learning how to play, all you need to do is check boxes for which abilities you have, and you don't need to flip through a book to be like, wait, how does this work again? Right? You can just read it right there on the sheet. And likewise, everything that everybody uses, which are like usually called universal moves, are often printed out on player reference sheets, or you can have them as a PDF, obviously. And those rules tend to also fit on 1 to like maybe 10 pages maximum, right? But usually like 1 or 2 pages. In this case, it's like a 3-page affair, just because each one is separated. So if you're out of the dungeon, you only need 1 sheet. You just need the out of the dungeon sheet, essentially, the free play sheet.
Right.
And then if you're traversing the dungeon, you just need traversal moves. And then if you're boss fighting, you probably aren't using free player traversal, so you just need the boss fight moves. We call it dueling, actually. I just realized. We just call the boss monsters bosses in this because no reason to beat around the bush with it. But we
Yeah.
refer to it as dueling because it's usually fighting one single opponent.
Right.
The boss is, and yeah, in terms of it, like sometimes you'll see on the playbook sheets in this that it gives you access to using moves that you wouldn't normally get to use in this scenario. So like I think the shield playbook has like the ability to use one of the traversal moves during a boss fight to do more things. Like it's easier to heal fear during a boss fight or during a traversal than it is during a boss fight. And so being able to bring in that mechanic from the traversal and that being a unique thing you can do was also like something that I felt was pretty important. But generally it was again to try to stress that accessibility, that idea that like I'm a new person, I'm learning the rules, and when my GM says like, so what do you want to do? And I say, well, I want to run past all these monsters. And they say, oh, that sounds like a what's it called? What was the name of the move? It's been a while. Hold on a second.
Let's see. Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't pulled up here. So looking at
It,
wielder,
it's
yeah,
Passar.
yeah.
Passar. So yeah, the move is Passar, which is the move for like bypassing something. It comes
Hmm.
from the French fencing term for like taking a passing step past your opponent. And mainly just because we didn't want to name it traverse because that would get confusing.
Sure.
Right.
But if you say like I just want to bypass the enemy, then your GM says, oh, that's a Passar move. So take a look at that rule and roll that. And you can read it all in like 5 seconds and go, okay, and you roll it. And one of the other great things, obviously, with Powered by the Apocalypse is the mechanics are set in such a way that you see what the dice say, and then you as the player look at the move, and the move says, you get to pick these things. What do you want? So even like your actions and the outcomes of your actions are customizable. And I really, really loved that. I loved that it wasn't just the GM tells you what happens every single time.
That's definitely one of my favorite things about the Powered by the Apocalypse system in general is how much player agency it gives you.
Absolutely.
And then,
yeah.
sorry, last thing is
No, you're
obviously the dueling moves are different for wielders and weapons.
I love that.
Which exists both for the reason that like they are two very different roles, and so it feels like when you're taking one versus when you're taking the other, you're playing almost a slightly different game. But the other thing that it does is it allows us to have more clarity in saying like, does this ability I get from my weapon form affect me when I'm a wielder? Usually, no, but sometimes it does actually. And that can be a fun thing to do. Like the fact that I am a, I don't know, like a cutlass, like a pirate's cutlass, gives me some kind of advantage when I'm in wielder form. That could be fun, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Alrighty.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and take our break real quick here, since this feels like a good point to kind of do that. We'll be back in 10 to 15. Stick around. We will have more discussions coming up, including full-on character creation, some actual gameplay discussion, and then we still need to, I think when we come back, we actually do need to have a discussion as to what weapon we actually are. So stick around for that.
All
do
right.
the things. We'll be back soon.
Hydrate, have some tea. Okay, we're good now. Sorry.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Sword and Tea. Thank you
Hey.
for joining us for this chat with Maso Perez as we talk about Life on the Edge, the official Boyfriend Dungeon TTRPG. We have chatted a little bit.
Camera shuffle.
Okay.
Some people don't. Please continue.
Okay. I'm actually there, despite the fact that it does say that I'm also LD. That will fix this momentarily. But yeah, thank you for you to join. Thanks to you for joining us. Thanks to Muscle for joining us so far. We've chatted a little bit about character creation, kind of the inspiration of the game itself and how it came to be. But as we're coming back from break, I think we all need to answer the question that's been looming over us this whole time. This literal, sword of Damocles. What weapon do you think you would be if you were going to create yourself in this game? I will ask Maso first, then LD. What weapon do you think you most identify as?
It rotates for me. Since I actually train with weapons, I just go through phases of like, I'm all about rapier now, and I'm all about longsword. The last time someone asked me, I gave the answer of I think I would probably be a longsword. Okay. But today, to be honest, because I'm like 6'4", and I've always been known as a fairly lanky but quick person and things like that, I feel like I would go with partisan, the bladed spear, the one that you can cut and stab with, because on top of the fact that that's just one of the weapons that I haven't had the chance to train yet, but is in one of the systems I train, but also just because like I've always liked spears, but they can also be like, their versatility is found in what you use them for more so than how you use them, like whether you're throwing them or stabbing or whatever. But the partisan I always was really attracted to, because the idea of like it's just a sword on a really, really long stick is so cool. Like every kind of like sword pole arm, like the Chinese guandao or the Japanese naginata, right? Like all of them are really awesome. Just to give a slightly more original answer this time, I'm gonna go with the partisan. That would be me.
I love that. That's a great answer. I always agree with you when it comes to spears, where it's like, okay, it stabs. That's why I always like glaives a little bit better. It stabs and does something else, but it always felt like a halberd did a little bit too much. It's like, okay, we're trying to do everything now. No, I think that's a great answer. Yes, sword on a stick. Yes, Shadow, absolutely. LD, what about you?
That's a tough one, actually, because I go back and forth between what I think that I am. I've always rather liked morning stars, personally. I mean, we all know I love a whip. It's very fun as far as a weapon is concerned. There's just something about a morning star. I feel like I don't have a particularly good reason. I also gravitate towards scythes because I do love glaives, but I'm also a gothy bitch who loves a scythe. Really. But I don't, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I'm maybe not elegant enough to actually pull off a whip or a scythe. If they feel like elegant or something, I don't know. I feel like a Morningstar is actually like who I am deep down in my, really.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. I respect that.
Spiky.
Yeah, it's more than a mace. Yeah, and also Morningstar, one of the best names for a weapon
It's
too.
so good.
It's a great
really cool
name. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of I have to be a sword, right? Like literally, I was born as a sword. I have no other options. I'm most of my heritage is German or Scottish, so typically when I think of Scottish blades, I think of the claymore. When I think of German blades, the Zweihander often comes up, so it's probably something that's big and dual wielding or double, you need both hands to hold the help. But yeah, there's just that or an armor sword. I've wanted to get a sword tattoo for a long time, and the biggest thing that's held me back is what kind of sword it's going to be. So living with that indecision already, I think I'm just going to say it's a sword. I will come to the rest of that answer later. Fantastic. I'm glad we solved that, because as we move into character creation, that's going to be a very important aspect of what we become, because as we've noted for this game, you both play as a human character, humanoid character, depending on what setting you want to put this in, because this absolutely can be put into essentially your D&D setting, your fantasy setting. You could have elves and orcs and goblins and trolls and dwarves and everything like that also turn into weapons. I think that's kind of cool to have a dwarf turn into a weapon. But you can also do it in any other setting with just regular people. However, they're going to turn into a weapon. So what kind of weapon are they going to turn into? So let's jump into to character creation and really break down what that looks like. So Maso, if you want to walk us through what it looks like to create a character for Life on the Edge.
Sure thing. So, as with most Powered by the Apocalypse games, you can very much just create a character by looking at the playbooks, deciding which one you like, and then following the directions on them, where it just says, these stats, do this, pick 2, etc., right?
Yeah.
If you just like the minimalism, go that route. But because we had a good inkling that there would be a decent amount of people where this could possibly be their first RPG, where they might have played the video game, really liked it, heard that it had a tabletop RPG, and just kind of impulse buyed it without, thinking it through, maybe. We also wanted to make sure that there was a system to facilitate an easier kind of creation process for them. So what I did was, again, citing my little unsung hero here, Artesia, is we took an idea from that, which comes in other systems as well, Burning Wheel and a handful of others. I think 5th edition also did this in one of its supplements, but it's called a life path system, where you can actually roll a bunch of dice on different random tables to create a character. And in Artesia, it's very involved, but for ours, we call it a character prompt system, which is that it gives you vague things that you can then base something around, where you're still making all of the choices as you go. So for instance, it might say, like, how do you feel about being a weapon? And it gives you a vague notion of like how positive or how negative, but the actual ways that that's expressed is completely up to you as you create your character. Now, the other thing that's a little bit unique about the character prompt system is, since most of it is 2d6 as well, that also means that the options are weighted, which means that the options at the ends of each thing are more rare.
Oh, yeah.
So you're more likely to get like a slightly more mild option. And then that means that every so often when we roll a character who has like a really extreme opinion, it's funny and unique, and not everybody rolled that result by complete happenstance most of the time.
I see that. So like for this
Yeah.
first question here, as I'm looking at the character sheet, for those who don't know, one of the questions, I love that you call them narrative prompt questions too, as like, because these are things that are designed to make you think. If you roll a 2, for instance, you hate being a weapon so much you will not transform until you resolve your first struggle, which is awesome. I mean, what a great concept. I love that.
Yeah, so
Like, that's very extreme.
I think that it would be really fun, although we answered the question as to what like weapons we would be. I think it would also be really fun for us, if we are going to go through character creation, to just kind of roll our way through the prompts
I got
and
my
see
dice
what we
ready,
get.
I think.
You know
Oh,
what I mean?
absolutely.
Oh no, I don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on,
So
I gotta
let's see.
grab
We
mine.
just.
I know, I gotta
need
grab some
2d6.
dice. I'll be back.
Yeah.
Right behind me. You go.
Yeah, you just need a pair of d6s and you're all good. Some of the rolls will be 1d6 and some of them will be 2d6.
All right.
So I'm going to make my roll for the first one, because the first one is, do you want your wielder or weapon form to match, is the first question. And you start by selecting or rolling a general weapon, right? So that one is a 1d6. And I rolled... It keeps falling off. There we go. I rolled 2. I got a blunt. I
Okay.
got a blunt weapon.
I can't get away from it. I rolled a blade.
Ooh,
There you go.
perfect. All right, I gotta do
The
this.
saga continues.
I have really fabulous metal chonky dice, which feels appropriate for this. Okay.
So 1d6 for the first roll, because it's
1d6.
actually what weapon we are.
Okay, great. Oh god. Nope, that's gone forever now. I also rolled a blade.
Okay. You can make characters that are the same, but if you want, you could re-roll that.
Just for fun.
Unlike most Powered by
Spike!
the Apocalypse games. Yeah.
Woo! Spike. Yes, I will take that.
Yeah.
I was
So
like,
are
you
the
could have
three
been
primaries.
a chainsaw. I do like the chainsaw is provided as an option for
I'm
for
into
bladed. I love the elegance of like, oh, I think I'll be a scimitar, or I'll be a dowel blade, and then it's just like, I'll just be a chainsaw. Fuck that. I'm a horror movie fan. Maybe that'd
Yeah.
be great. Yeah.
It's so good.
Well, I mean, like, I don't want to give anything away, but one of the characters in the DLC is a stick. Like, not like a fighting stick, like a twig from the ground.
That's great.
Amazing.
So,
Incredible.
like,
Perfection.
it doesn't need to be a weapon. It can be like a tool or an object that can simply be used as a weapon. So yeah. So there we have each of our playbooks.
Claws. I'm gonna be claws. That's it.
Ooh. All right. I think I'll be a bar flail.
Ooh.
I like that.
That's for those who don't know, historically, although there were the flails where it's like a ball on the end of a long chain, the more common flail was what you call a grain flail, which is like a really long staff that has a nunchuck head at the end, essentially.
Oh. Huh.
And so you
okay.
can smash over people's guards with it. And it was used really well in the Hussite Revolution, which it was the most successful peasant revolution in European history, where they just beat knights to death over the head with it. It's great. So I'm gonna be those.
I was gonna say, I'm sensing a theme because you had picked sword on a stick before. Now we're picking basically mace
Things
on a stick.
sticks.
Yeah, there's a reach
I'm in a
quality I
stick
appreciate.
mood today.
Yeah, that's
go
fair.
for it.
Okay. So our next question is, hold on a second. Sorry, getting quick text.
All right.
You're good.
So our next question is, how do you feel about it? How do you feel about being that weapon?
Yeah, let's see. Okay. So this is a 2d6.
Yep.
2d6. I rolled a 9.
Rolled an 8.
Roll the 7.
Okay, so we're getting the middling.
Yep.
But that's okay.
I got the
it means
most
the more
middle
ex-
of the middlings.
It means that the more extreme options people can find when they grab the game, right?
Yeah,
And you get to
exactly.
see all the
Absolutely.
weird options. But yeah, so 7 is you don't feel any special way about it. It's just
Correct.
another part of who you are.
Uh-huh.
And then for you, Derek, it is you generally like being a weapon, but you don't draw attention to it.
Right. Yeah.
And then
Why make
Yeah.
a big deal about it?
And then my blunt flail is your being a weapon has always been a positive influence on your life. So I think given that result, I think I am going to make the two of them match. And I'm just going to make like the most blue collar trucker type character vibe with this that I can think of. Like just blue collar, hefty son of a bitch.
I haven't gotten a firm grasp. I just know claws.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of, we'll see see if this next question gives me something, is like starting to develop who this person is.
Fair enough. So the next one is like, if you're an experienced role player, you can actually skip this one for the most part, because a lot of people who play tabletop RPGs, they'll know what stats they want to pick.
Right.
But for the fun of it again, maybe this will change what we're thinking for our weapons to some degree. We can roll a 1d6 for your preferred way to tackle a challenge. And that's going to give you what your best stat might be, right? So that's a 1d6.
Rolled a 2.
I also got a 2. I'm going to ignore that because you can choose to do that. So I'm just going to stick with heft.
I got a 5, so I'm getting the fracture move. Follow it up and deal with it later. Oh no, real life trauma.
Yes. So in the game, there's a subsystem where the funny part about this game is your physical harm is the one that will never kill you. You only die in this game if you want to. Instead, when your health runs out in the game, it's assumed that you have been hurt enough that we need to leave the dungeon now. And so once you leave, you can recover, or if you decided you didn't want to play that character anymore, you could kill them off, but, you know. The other one, though, is fear. And fear is your mental well-being. And when it gets too high, it increases what's called your break stat. And that's a stat that does actually have rolls made in it. Like, there are moves that require your break stat. But the other thing is, if it gets too high, you lose your character until they can be defeated. They become a boss in the dungeon if they become broken. So, the fracture move is a move that every playbook has, where it abuses the break stat for an advantage, but with a high risk, high reward function. It's for unstable characters, essentially. Yeah. So, we have at least one unstable person.
Beat. I love.
All right.
I love for number 2 is find the passive least resistance and exploit it, which is your best stat, your grace and precision, which I feel like works really well for claws. Like, it's very up and yeah.
Well, like if you're claws, you're gonna want to be like cutting at people's like
exactly
throats. You're not gonna do a ton to them if you're trying to cut at their chest or their.
Correct.
It's just gonna hurt.
Yeah.
But it's not gonna like do some real damage, right?
Yeah.
And then our next one is, what is one of the things your character is dealing with? So this is going to be one of your struggles. Okay. Struggles in the game are the source of your character's like strife. Usually the source of their fears, and in terms of how they work mechanically, overcoming them is how you help progress, as well as it gives the Master of Ceremonies the chance to actually come up with what the dungeons will be filled with. So if my character, for instance, has like an abusive father, that will change the way that the dungeon looks compared to if my character instead was just like super socially anxious, right?
Right.
So this gives us a kind of seed to plant for our character's struggles, at least one of them. And it's still going to be vague enough that you get to customize it. So I got a 7.
Got a 6.
I got an 11.
Ooh!
Oh, an 11. Big
Ooh!
One.
Damn.
Okay, so...
This feels like it works well for your other one, Derek.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Bottle up, don't even realize it's there.
So on a 6, you got a big breakup with a friend, family member, or a loved one who meant a lot to you.
Yeah.
So you have breakup drama. That's
I
your
do.
problem.
I mean, I was saying, I feel like I'm getting Catwoman vibes from this. Like, essentially some Selena Kyle vibes from this character. Flaws.
Femme fatales are fun.
They are.
Like, I'm doing a matching character. Why not?
Yeah.
Right?
It feels like me playing a femme fatale, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Never heard of it.
Nope. Who, me?
Yeah.
Never.
And then on a 7, I got a major event-based trauma or failure that resulted in a bit of a complex. That's probably one of the vaguest ones, but the reason that I wrote it that way was because a lot of media tends to do it where it's like a thing happened, and that's why they're like that, right?
Right.
And that's not how mental health usually works. So I wanted there to be one option for that, like, very narrative kind of form of mental health issue. So I'm just going to say that my character, his big trauma or event was he was in a really, really bad truck crash, and that's why he's not driving his truck no more. Now he's working in the dungeon.
All right.
Yeah. And then Derek, yours, an 11, which is one of the more extreme options. Whatever
Yes.
it is you're dealing with, you don't realize it's bothering you. So you either
Right.
choose from this list, or you would give the MC the chance to choose from the list and not tell you.
Super fun. I do like the option of like, everything's fine, and just have the MC in the background. Yeah. Waiting for
Yeah,
that.
in one of the play tests, we had a guy who got that option, and then it ended up being toxic masculinity.
Yep.
Amazing. Incredible.
Listen, if I wanted to play my dad, I would have just.
And yet here we are.
Here we are.
All right. And now we have another fun one. So this one is, what is your relationship with each of the other player characters?
Ooh.
So the way this one usually works, as I do it,
Mhm.
is when I'm running the game, although some people might have other choices, is we each roll a 2d6,
Mhm.
and we pick one other person, and it can't be overlaps, right?
Right.
So if I pick LD as the source of mine, LD can't pick me in response,
I
right?
have to,
Mm,
yeah.
mhm.
LD has to pick Derek, and then you would have to pick me, Derek. And then that way, it's like, it establishes the relationships without us needing to roll for every single person in the party.
I see.
I like that.
Yeah.
So, everybody roll your 2d6s, and let's see how these goons fit together.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I got an 8.
I also got an 8, so I'm gonna re-roll mine.
Let's
Okay.
see. I got a 10.
I got a 6.
All right. So, 6 is both of you knew about each other, but only met and spent time when the group formed.
Huh?
Which I think is a fair relationship, because that's something to explore, is that unfamiliarity, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
8 is both of you were close and remain as such, but you don't know the specifics of each other's struggles.
Uh-huh.
So in that one, you really haven't like combed into it. And then Derek, you got a 10, and it's you two are best friends, relatives in a committed relationship, or long-term professional partners.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So who matches up with who? We have a possibly femme fatale claw
Yeah.
lady. We've got a trucker flail.
Uh-huh.
And then we have Derek's character, who so far we have seems to be some kind of traumatized sword person.
Just a bottled up sword person.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you like think your character's like vibe would be generally? We're gonna get to that by the end, but like, how are you picturing them so far, Derek?
So definitely picturing somebody who is more like affable on the outside, like literally not a care in the world, because there's just like it's that person that you meet where you're like, oh, they're going to explode any day now. It's not today, but like the slightest thing is going to just break whatever this facade is, and it's going to be the most minor inconvenience, and they're not going to realize why.
So
Yeah,
sweetheart is the outside impression that we would get.
Yeah, like I think this is probably somebody who's great in large social settings, but you get them one-on-one and they just get like really grumpy all of a sudden.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Again, I'm not describing my father, I promise. Yeah, no, that's definitely how I'm kind of reading this. Is just like the second that you can't find the screwdriver that you were looking for that you had put away 3 weeks ago and probably put in the wrong spot, you're going to just start cussing at the drawer.
Oh.
All right. Well, I'm sensing a lot coming out here. So how about this?
Yeah, that's fair.
Derek, what if you also have your character have daddy issues that way, right?
I think that's probably pretty fair.
And then your character, you pick me. So our two characters are best friends because my trucker guy is like the dad you wish you.
I like that.
I feel like
the
that's
way to
really
work it around.
cool. That works really
Like-
beautifully.
Like a very traditional man, but also a man who is like very wholesome and genuinely there for you. That's trucker flail.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like I would pick Derek then for mine
Mm-hmm.
as I've known about. We knew about each other before, but only met and spent time when the group was formed.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's something that feels very sort of outsider about this femme fatale character with your two characters.
That's fair. And
Absolutely.
you know what
Like-
it could be?
Uh-huh.
You and I could be close, but it could be that you knew him back before when he was a trucker, and he like
Oh,
helped you once when your
yeah.
car broke down, and they've been friends ever since. But they never got like past that surface level, like, oh, he's a nice guy, you know?
Absolutely.
Because I feel like you would lean towards like, oh, is she frozen?
Oh no, I'm here.
Okay,
Am I
sorry.
frozen? I was like, no, I'm just
you're
sorry.
good.
I'm like
It
staring
looked
at
like you were
things.
for a second.
Just-
I feel like your character could also like lean on like a high society vibe. So it's
Oh
like
yeah.
it's almost
Fair
like
enough.
you're high class, my character is like very blue collar, and then Derek's character is like just a very like I'm middle of the road kind of person.
Yeah.
I'm definitely
know?
feeling that. Yeah.
All right. So cool. We've got that settled then. And then
Okay.
this one is a bit of an optional one where it's like if you have NPC links, right? So like for instance, in your case, Derek, you have your dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it says like, what is your relationship with that person? So if an NPC comes up while you're talking about your concepts, you're supposed to roll a 1d6.
Mm-hmm.
We know that you probably want to have something a little bit negative, but what you can do is you can do what I did earlier, which is roll, and if you don't like the option, pick a different one.
Absolutely.
And I've got the ex or whoever my previous relationship.
That's
or
true.
whatever.
You
Yeah.
do. So you should roll
Yeah.
for that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because links are also part of the mechanics in the game.
Mhm.
Every relationship you have with another character is a link that's rated from 1 to 3, and you can use that as a bonus you can pull on when you're making a roll related to them.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to the player characters, if you're wielding me and our link is at 2, then you can get a +2 to a roll, basically, when you're wielding me, and then
Mhm.
it'll go back down to 0. But it's like a currency you can spend as well.
So I did roll a 2, very much to just keeping with the story. They were of no help or support to you and do not consider themselves responsible or even indirectly. So yeah, the dice are really telling a story here.
Big
oof.
oof.
Yeah. Well, that's also, it definitely feels like that's part of the game, is whether
Yeah.
like TTRPGs are not therapy, but they can be therapeutic. I've said that before. I work in mental health. We use TTRPGs to help people. It's games like this that really help you kind of manifest certain things and deal with them in certain ways. They are not a curative, but they can be, again, therapeutic.
Yep.
And I do appreciate games like this that literally you are fighting inner demons in it doesn't have to be that. It does not have to be that you are fighting inner demons. It could be fighting literal monsters, depending on how you flavor this game. But the original intent is, you're tackling trauma, and whether that trauma is yours or whether you are putting yourself in the shoes of somebody and imagining that trauma, that still is therapeutic. You're still working through something, even if it's not something you've necessarily experienced. It still makes you, I think, a stronger person on the other end. So definitely want to shout that out.
Mhm.
As we are working through this stuff here, it kind of does make a game where I think people will find themselves to be different on the other end, and the best kind of games do that, is where you are different after you have played them. So just wanted to shout that out while I had it at the top of my mind.
I appreciate that. I
Absolutely.
also, that reminded me that I also had a bit of a different philosophy in terms of how I integrated safety tools into it,
Mm.
where rather than having a chapter or page dedicated to these are the safety tools you should use while playing this, I instead just kind of peppered it throughout every example of play. That almost every example of play involves a player kind of like vetoing something and the GM either going along with it or discussing it with them or whatnot, to make sure that, like, I tried my best to make it that anybody who's reading this and it's the first RPG they read, it's automatically like giving them an idea of like, this is good, like, ways to play this. This is a good way to make sure everyone feels safe, especially in a game that is heavily focused on like psychic aspects of your characters,
Right.
psychological trauma, etc. Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry.
No, interesting.
LD, did you give a roll for yours?
I did. I do feel like that because of what the struggle part of this is, there's the only one that really fits is number 1. I rolled a 3. They are a friend of yours, aware of the struggle but unsure what to do about it. But if they're the, which like kind of makes sense, but if the breakup is the struggle, if the old relationship is the struggle, I feel like the direct cause of your struggle is either antagonistic or scary to you is slightly more interesting to me in that regard. But
if you like that, just go with it.
Yeah.
But part of the reason that those things can be still like, I feel that they're often still compatible when you're making a character using this system is because sometimes we never play the character who is the one who desperately wants to get back together with someone.
That's true.
And they really like each other, but the other person's like, I'm not in love with you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And
that's
it's still
fair.
just like stuck. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
so,
fair.
Like,
there's something
so
kind
you
of
don't
interesting
have to
about
pick that. But that is also how, like, if I was like a GM trying to encourage you to use it or whatever, like if we had all decided we're doing random for sure, right? And then you changed your mind, that's how I would try to specify, like, there still can be an interesting conflict in that. It's just a lower tension one again.
Yeah.
I feel like if you picked 1, for instance, then your ex might be a boss in the dungeon.
Right.
Whereas with this one, it's more like the boss is your own lack of self-worth that you don't think you can move on from them. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, that's really interesting. I always love the like high stakes, but I love that even something that seems like low stakes could be something else entirely.
It could be still just a big struggle, you know? But yeah, you can go with the high stakes one for sure.
I mean, no, I rolled random. I've been doing random so far. Let's stick with it. No, you've convinced me.
And then the last step before we would move on to like character sheets, where we would mainly just be like doing the mechanical aspects of character creation, is what is your vibe? There's 3 columns.
Yeah.
Each one has different aspects of a character that makes them like appealing. And then you pick like 1 from each of them, or if you want, you can pick even more than 1. Lots of people will pick like multiple physical descriptors or whatever, right? So for instance, I'm going to pick, because I already have a pretty strong idea of who my character is. I'm going to pick Chill.
Okay.
He's a very, very chill old guy, right?
Yeah.
For his what's it called? For his like physical trait, I'm gonna pick rugged. So he's a chill, rugged guy who wears, what kind of clothing are we looking at? I'm gonna say vintage.
Okay.
Like the idea is like he's dressed in mostly casual clothes, but it's all clearly stuff he bought in like the 90s or the 80s.
We're not talking like cute vintage. We're talking about somebody who has worn the same jacket for 40 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's got like an old bomber jacket with holes in it and stuff like that. And he's worn it every day to work, and he only washes it once a month.
Perfect. I'm gonna go, I think, cheerful, because I love a femme fatale character, but I love specifically like somebody who, because you always think of like femme fatales as being slinky and mysterious and whatever, but I always love to have that little bit of a turn where they're actually just kind of like a little goofy or a little or cheerful, or a little brighter and not quite so dark. I love a cheery goth in the same way. Like,
Yeah.
you know, kind of a sunny personality.
Maybe not to the extreme of like Harley Quinn, but Harley Quinn is a femme fatale. I couldn't hear you, LD.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say, would we consider her to be a femme fatale? Because I don't, but that's fine.
I think if you're pushing the chair, I think you could push.
Yeah.
She is a woman who will kill you. That's
not how I would describe. Okay, anyway, that's not my that is not my personal definition of a femme fatale.
That's fair.
She's a gangster mall more than anything,
She is.
A mall is not the same as a femme fatale. But I always think of like the Rita Hayworth. Anyway.
Sure.
But I love that little cheery aspect of it.
Yeah.
I always go with majestic hair. I have to. That's my little self-insert moment, but also I think, you know, if especially
you can pick another.
No,
you can pick more than one.
Yes, but also like I love the idea of like somebody who's a claw wielder with a glorious mane of hair and gives it that sort of like lion stalking quality to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we're gonna go with chic, stylish. Yeah, a little classy. There we go.
I like it.
I think I am going to go with much to the affable quality, charming, having everything bottled up. A good dichotomy I always loved seeing that is somebody who gets a lot of tattoos and is just like, oh, I don't feel that, and you know, if they've got a lot on the inside, they kind of express it on the outside. So I'm gonna go with tattooed, and otherwise clean cut, because I love the idea of somebody who dresses very cleanly while also just has full sleeves and like knuckle tattoos.
That's fun.
That's great.
Very Peaky Blinders vibes.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
All right, and then from here we would go into the mechanical side of character creation, which is mostly like working out stat arrays and so forth. But I don't know if you guys would want to do that. I think it would be more interesting to possibly just pick weapon moves, and maybe if you guys feel like it, we pick edges or whatever just to get the feel for it. Because the stats are just numbers in this case, right?
Right. Yeah. Since we're not doing any real rolls in game, I think that might be. I do like that you do have the pre-generated, you know, much as you would see in Powered by the Apocalypse games, like Monster of the Week. So I do want to shout those out, where you do have stuff that's like heft and keen focused as opposed to sting and core. You did the pretty much balanced almost all the way across. The one that focuses specifically on heft with a little bit of like almost to the detriment of sting and core, and then a couple that kind of balance out the physicality, and like then again to the detriment of the charisma. So you, much to your point of your tank and your support and your glass cannon, and you have those qualities being represented. So I just wanted to shout that out real quick.
Yeah, the creation for it is kind of similar to a point buy, though, where it's just you just add all the bonuses together, and if they come to a +2, you've made a starting character. They will increase past that, but I don't know if just like working out the numbers when we're not going to end up playing is maybe not as much fun as picking our edges and our moves and stuff.
Yeah.
Since I know the system pretty well, I already basically have it worked out, I think. So what I'm going to say is that in mine we have a range or reach thing, and it's called ambit. And the ambit system is called the ambit system because ambit refers to the area of space you control, not just the area you could hit, right? So for me, for my flail, I'm going to give him the reach ambit because he's a big like staff flail when you use him, right? And then for his edges, I'm giving him flexible and rend, which flexible will let him kind of like smash around guards and things like that to represent his flexible end. And rend, I believe, allows him to use heft to drive, which means that he can damage enemies just with how heavy he is, rather than focusing on like bringing sting in, because usually to damage a boss you need to have good sting. And then his flaw will be unstable, because essentially what that one does is it's a flaw where when you're using me, you can't make the same move twice in a row. You can't keep smacking the guy over and over. You need to like do something to whirl him back around and get him in position again. And then for my moves, I'm going to pick Momentum Master and Death Drop, which are both moves where if you miss while using me, I can screw with them. So me being inaccurate in your hands becomes an advantage for my character. Yeah.
Oh, I'm seeing here. Okay. Yeah.
Death Drop lets me drive if you roll a miss, and Momentum Master allows me to strike when you miss on a beat, which means like strike and beat do very similar things. So if you miss, I can like make that head whirl around and do the thing you tried to do. And then if you miss on a different thing, I can also make it like you missed, but the head snaps back and smashes through their defenses and damages them.
Absolutely. So okay. I do like that this quality allows you to play some of those mix and match kind of weapons, like a Targe, which is both a shield and technically a spike, and it kind of, you know, you still get the shield qualities to it. You also, as we noted before, there's no real ranged weapons, but there's the thrown quality, which is still in here as well to actually give you that distance. LD, is anything standing out to you? I'm going through them here real quick.
Well, Derek, you're supposed to take the fracture move, right?
I am supposed to take the fracture move. That's right. So, looking at that character sheets for the blade fracture move, the back end of your blade can be just as useful in combat, even if it is blunted. When you strike hard with the reverse of your true edge, mark fear, and you may roll plus break instead of heft to make the strike move. If you gain 10 or more in this roll, your wielder may follow and make the assault dueling move with advantage, even if they acted before you. So it's kind of a double-edged sort of quality to it, which is
that's
kind of
what
cool.
It's called. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you see right
the
next
fracture
to
of
fracture
double-edged.
move, it's double-edged.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the premise of that one being that, like, you have to mark fear, you get to roll with break, which may be good or bad, depending on how high your break is compared to your heft. But if your break is high enough, and you're rolling, and you roll high enough on it and get a 10 plus, then that means that even if your wielder already acted, they get to go again, and the assault move is like the drive move, where it actually damages the boss. The way the bosses work is, instead of them having health pools, they're made up of qualities that have their different powers in them, and you have to create openings on them, and then you damage them as two separate moves. And the idea behind that is, again, to reinforce the teamwork, right? If a weapon opens it up, the wielder damages. If the wielder opens it up, the weapon damages. But with yours, you can kind of break the action economy a little bit and give your wielder advantage to just really get in there and damage hard, if you guys were otherwise failing.
Absolutely. It really shows that you are somebody who knows weapons well, who has worked with weapons well. Because even looking again at the blade stuff, where I'm seeing hooked on you, where you might have the concept of the tiger head hook blades, or the what is it, the fugao, I think is what they're called, but like that are often used in Eastern cultures, or you have again the heavier blades. It allows you to really customize down and say, I'm not just a sword, really narrow down what type of sword, or narrow down what type of chainsaw. Maybe you're one of the double long ones for taking down redwoods. I really just want to shout that out, that there is a level of expertise that is clear in the writing here, and I think that's really a beautiful thing about this game, is it shows your expertise. It shows your knowledge in the writing. No, absolutely. I'm going through. I love the energy weapons too, because that adds that level of, whether you want to play in a magical setting or a sci-fi setting, it can easily be translated either way there. Shield weapon's great. I'm a big Captain America fan. I always love a shield being an option. And then
One of their moves is literally Captain of the Nation, because I couldn't name which nation.
it's very
That's perfect.
You know, it's it's Canada, it's Russia. Why not? They all have a Captain America or a version of him in Marvel.
They do.
Yeah, no, this is so cool. I also love in Spike. You have again the terminology there, the riposte or escape artist. It's Fencer's Feint. You have a lot of the
Riposte.
It's great. Yeah, escape artist I think is a really interesting one
I
to
think
slip away from, especially for a weapon that is so melee involved, as we noted before.
It was inspired by Valeria.
Yeah.
There's a number of moves in there that are either named directly after moves from the game,
Yeah.
or were heavily inspired by the properties of those weapons. So there's 2 moves in the spike category that just make you make a really good roguish dagger. Because a spike can be a spear, a dagger, a sword. It can be anything. Like in theory, you could make a morning star that isn't a blunt. It's a spike.
Right.
Because of just the way that you use it or whatever,
Sure.
right? So like it's more about like what it does to the target than what it is in its form. And so like escape artist was there to facilitate that. Like I want to play like a very D&D roguish character. For those curious, escape artist allows you to, if you get out of the view of the direct enemies, then you basically become essentially invisible for the mechanics.
Yeah.
Like you can sneak up on stuff a lot easier. So as long as you break vision, right? And I wanted to facilitate that. I wanted that to be fun.
For sure. Are there any? I should ask this. Are there any Easter eggs, like you kind of mentioned with Captain of the Nation? Any other Easter eggs that are kind of hidden in name design or even the concept design between any of the moves here that that you wanted to perhaps note? I mean, it's perfectly fine if you want people to search for them and find them on their own, but
yeah, most of them are definitely very like fencing related ones usually. So like they actually made me change one of them.
Really?
Because they thought it wasn't clear enough. But like duelist rotation, for instance, references how when you're fencing with a small sword or a rapier, a very pokey sword, the swords circle each other as you're getting ready to come at each other, because each of you is trying to get a better angle to push the other sword away while you stab, right?
Sure.
So that was the idea behind duelist rotation. But in Spike, there's one called Low Burst that used to be named Boar's Tooth, which was named after a specific longsword thrust from a specific historical manual that I study. And they made me get rid of it because they're like, no one's gonna get it. And I was like, I thought it was clear enough because it's the idea of like from coming up, because like
sure,
right?
Yeah,
that's the idea behind it. But they didn't think it was clear enough, so I changed it to Low Burst because that's more or less what it is. It's down and then up, right?
Okay.
But it's a really scary attack where you hold the sword pointed towards the ground to kind of entice your opponent to come in, and then when they do, usually they'll come in with a higher attack, which leaves their bottom open, and then you bring the sword up suddenly, and in the illustration, it goes right there. Right into the nape of the neck and the chin, which is if you really think about the dynamics of what it would be like to get stabbed there, is a horrifying thought.
That is not comfy, no.
So, but yeah, the Boar's Tooth is one of the attacks and stuff that I have not mastered yet that I really want to, and I wanted to put it in the game. So there's a few other ones, but it's definitely kind of like a spot it if you can kind of thing. Right. A lot of references to things like, what's it called? Like phalanx is obviously a reference to the Greek, the Greek formation, and there's going to be other similar things like I don't know, Bull's Rush and things like that, where it's like it's really evoking a very specific thing, technically speaking. But most of them aren't like pop culture references. There's only a handful of those.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay. Was there Am I missing anything for character creation before we move on to
Unless
the
you
next
guys want to pick weapon moves for your own characters.
I mean,
that would be the only other thing.
yeah, I haven't gone through and picked my stuff yet, but like, because I feel like for claws, the ambit that I would pick was,
You would pick close, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and then
I feel
you
like
could pick pouncing strike, which is based off of Pocket's move from the game.
Oh,
You get the
Pocket!
ability to jump forward at somebody, and it helps make up for your lack of range.
Totally.
So that could be one.
And I love and backstab. I was looking at the different edges, and I was like, well, paired would make sense, and like maybe, probably, quick. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah,
Quick
probably
seems right. And as far as flaws, I feel like fragile for like claws are fragile things.
It would actually, if you pick paired, you're required to pick two-handed.
Oh, am I? Oh yeah.
You're two weapons.
Yes.
So you need to be used in both hands. But
oh, you're right, two-handed. That is true.
Yeah. But the paired one makes up for it with a really cool ability. It only comes up when you're fighting other weapons. It doesn't come up when you're fighting like monsters that like just fight with their body.
Right.
But if you're fighting another wielder who uses a weapon and they don't have the paired thing, then paired automatically gives you advantage on like every roll against them.
Oh, fun. Neat.
Because fighting a skilled dual wielder one-on-one is a nightmare.
Yeah, I bet. Which way is it coming from? There we go.
Yeah.
Rad.
But yeah, those are good ones for sure. And backstab just makes sense for the femme fatale thing.
Exactly.
And then I feel like another one that could work for you, Derek, possibly, would maybe be Deep Cutter.
I was looking at that one. Yeah, let's see, leaves a huge
almost
gash.
like your character is deceptively angry and deceptively dangerous, where you seem like a chill, stable guy, but there's all that bubbling under the surface. And so you seem like a normal sword, but once it hits you, anybody getting hit is like, oh, that really hurts.
Right, I think that's why I'd either go with heavy or unstable for the flaw as well. Yeah.
Fragile could also work for you, because what fragile means in this is that you get double fear from bosses.
Yeah, and that would go into to fracture as well.
So you break faster than others, mentally speaking, not just in your weapon form.
That checks out.
Right. Well, and that was the next thing I wanted to kind of talk about was, we talked a little bit with combat where there's health and stress, which both kind of come into the overall harm that a character feels. But there is the concept that because characters are weapons from time to time, they can break as well. Want to talk a little bit about how that works and how to mend if possible, what it kind of looks like.
Yeah, so in the video game, that was actually what the main plot is about. You keep finding weapons that have been chipped or broken in the dungeon, and you nurse them back to health, and that's some of your romance options. Not all of them, but some of them.
Yeah.
And you're trying to solve the mystery of who's kidnapping these weapons and cutting off pieces of them, basically, or breaking them, right? And so that was already kind of baked in, but the idea of your mind breaking and your weapon form breaking being tied together just made a lot of sense to me, especially since in the game, when you find them, their weapon form is damaged, but their human form isn't. So it's clear that there's something happening there that isn't just if I break your sword form, your arm snaps off, right?
Right.
So what happens is in the game, when you start the game, your break is equal to the number of struggles that you have usually, which means you can start a game stronger in some respects than how you finish it, where break is what you use to navigate the dungeon. But the idea is as that goes away, it makes the dungeons more difficult. So there's kind of that, it fixes for the problem of, we've gained more abilities, we're so much stronger now. Yeah, but your break keeps going down, right? So it's harder to get through the dungeon's going to take longer. And then in addition to that, you take fear. And every time you take up to 5 fear, the fear track resets to 0 and your break increases by 1. Every time your break increases as a result of fear, you have to pick one of the break increases on your sheet. The first one is break a weapon move. which means like it refers to the dueling moves, like the primary moves that you use or the ones on your sheet. If you break it, that either means that you can't use it until you decrease your break, or it means you always do disadvantage when you roll it, right? And then the next one after that, if your break increases again on top of that, you break a wielder move, right?
Ooh.
So now even outside of your weapon form, you are struggling. Like even if if your weapon move broke while you were traversing and then you get to the boss and you're like, well, I'm going to be a wielder. If your break increases again, now you're taking another one. And because of the way that this game works, it's not about min-maxing. It's not about like game balance necessarily.
No.
It's about what makes sense for the story, what makes sense for the game. And so the weapon move or the wielder move you break is always the one you want to use the most. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to break this one because I barely use that ever. Don't do that. It's way more fun if you break the move you want.
Yeah.
Right? And then that way it really feels like a struggle. And the MC should reinforce that. If your break increases a third time, total of 15 fear, you have to choose rip and tear out your broken self, which means that your player character, done for now, at least. You become a boss in your own dungeon. And the only way to get you back is for the other players to fight through your dungeon and defeat you as a boss. And you either need to make a replacement character, or if you're up to it, that player becomes the MC for that dungeon. And the MC becomes a player filling their role in the meantime. So there's a little bit of a round robin mode you can play in this game if you have confident players.
Yeah.
But you're asking, how do you mend it? When you're out of the dungeon, there's a move called Bond. You pick someone who has a link with you, and the two of you sit down and you have to role play a scene together. And if you role play that scene in a way that it feels that it progresses your relationship in a meaningful way, your link with them will increase by 1. And once everybody at the table agrees that was a good scene, we should move on now, then your break decreases by 1. So in the game, you are required to sit down and talk to your friends sometimes. If you've just been neglecting your mental health for too long in the game, you have to sit down and have a rap session with your friends and feel better about something.
Yeah, build those bonds, absolutely.
It's important.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. And I also think it's awesome that more and more games that we've been featuring here on Sword and Key, even one recently, which was about like fighting the agents of like extra dimensional hell and heaven in giant robot suits, also did have a, hey, sometimes you got to sit down and talk with your friends. And I love that that's becoming more and more part of games that we play.
You got to talk it through as a crew.
You do. You gotta talk it through.
I mean, it's a game about relationships. If you're not incentivized to do it, right, then a lot of people will just dungeon run endlessly and forget that they're supposed to be doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the bonds that are important. Speaking of bosses, I'm looking through some of the bosses that you have at the very end of the Life on the Edge PDF. They're great. I love the you give them weapon properties as well. I love that they're all, of course, representative of something, as they're meant to be, of course. The phone crab is fantastic as a first boss to present. The rotary phone crab as a symbol of the manifestation of, what do I want to say, things falling out of use. There's a term. It's like forced
obsolescence.
Obsolescence. Thank you. But then the queen is to be, they're manifesting in areas of stress, typically for younger people, or people in their 20s, whether it be a college setting or an abandoned mall that's full of all of these symbols, these metaphors for their stressors, a school, of course. And I think that's great, because it could be really anything. It could be any place where social pressures really like weigh heavily on people, and I love the suggestions for a lot of these enemies. And I should have asked this a lot earlier. Who is the artist for the PDF?
The same artist for the video game.
Okay, I was gonna say it shows it's very similar. So that's awesome. I will look them up here momentarily.
Now, because Kitfox helped you publish this, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Kitfox acted as the publisher, and for that, it was mainly what we usually call in tabletop RPGs as finishing, right?
Okay.
Which is that a lot of tabletop RPGers, me included, designers, are not. We are not graphic designers.
Right.
We might not be visual artists. I'm not a good visual artist. But we, our job is technically to write and make mechanics. But if you just write a document with just text and charts, no one is going to read and play your game.
Visuals are important.
Art sells RPGs, right?
Yes.
So usually finishing is when you're pitching a game to a publisher. Finishing is the main thing that you're going to be getting as like something they handle for you, and that's what happened here. The artist is also the graphic designer. Unfortunately, I think we neglected to actually have a credits page in our document. I know. So we're not credited specifically, but I believe their name was Shin, maybe. I don't recall exactly the name. I'm gonna check.
I think it's Shinren Lee. Main Kitfox artist. I literally, just as you were saying that, found that there was a Reddit Ask Me Anything from Kitfox Games where they actually answered this question. Who is main Kitfox artist and co-founder, lead artist on Moon Hunters and Shattered Planet, back in those games in 2013, and they liked his portfolio, liked his vibe in person. So so shout out to Shin for doing the artwork for this as well.
Shin is fantastic. Like, working with Shin was also good, mainly just via email correspondence, but like I almost never had to give notes for anything. It's just immediately like, this is the concept. Okay, but yeah, that was it. That perfect. Let's put it in. So
just because the artwork throughout, both for the weapons, for the monsters, for very emblematic of both, I should say representative of the video game, but also emblematic of the TTRPG as well. I also, to go back real quick, while we were talking about the concept of defeat and becoming a boss, and you're kind of working through all that, you do have, as you had mentioned before, the concept that characters can die, but also, if you like you said, it's piecemeal. If you want to include this mechanic, the concept to cheat death, which I think is really cool, and that gives some options as well, where you can essentially, while you're on death's door, be carried out, or if you roll lower, you can still survive, but like I think you had mentioned this before, have the phobia of the dungeon, increase break by 1, you can take a long-lasting wound, and kind of have those markers of adventuring. I tell my players when we do long-term games all the time that your characters at the beginning of a game should never recognize their characters at the end of the game. That I have a 3-year campaign now. If they were to, their characters at the end, whenever we end this game, if they were to look back through time, they wouldn't recognize the person that they were, because they have the mirror does not show that person anymore. And vice versa. If you were to look at the future, it looked like a total stranger. So I love the concept of being permanently changed while you are trying to fight and maybe fix these things about yourself, these things that are kind of that you carry with you every day. Anything you wanted to add to that? I'm more just saying how awesome it is, but is there anything you want to add, please?
No, for sure. And like that's the thing too, is like Powered by the Apocalypse games have a tendency to really put kind of character forward ways of design, and that's another thing that I like about them. But in this one, especially because it was so heavily involved with relationships, and essentially, like, we use the word struggles because we don't want people to feel like it has to be traumatic, right? It doesn't need to be that heavy. You can play a slapsticky, goofier version of this game or you can play one that's very moody and sad and things like that. But we want to focus on the characters' struggles, their relationships, things like that. And so it really just needed to be carried through everywhere in the game. So you heal with the bonds that you build. The dungeons resolve your struggles, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go away. If you want to play a character who continues to struggle with the thing, but it's just not part of the story anymore, you can do that. And likewise, when it comes to death and things like that, if we are going to include death, if you want to have a heavier game, then you can still come back from it. You can still survive it, but it should have a lasting effect.
Of course.
One of the things that you'll notice, for instance, is that all of the effects that can come out of cheat death actually are things you can't buy off with advancement. They're just things that your character is going to have from now on, right?
Right.
And that's a pretty, I think, generally an interesting way to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well as just a way that, like you said, helps reinforce that like things have changed. In the free fan-made unofficial version of the game way back when that I made, one of the instead of doing it how we did it here with the settings, I just had 3 default settings to assume you were going to be in. One that was like high fantasy, one that was exactly like the video game, and then the last one was where you are human experiments that have escaped and you're living in a dystopian cyberpunk setting. And then that was supposed to be the one where like all the most brutal, darkest stuff you could do with the system made sense there, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so like that one was fun too. I think I called it Brutalismo. But in general, it was just all the way through. I wanted to design something that was flexible enough to do a variety of things, but the things it's doing is always meant to evoke the game.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a matter of like, it's more like kind of creating alternate universes, like AU fan fiction for the game, than it should be for like fundamentally changing what the game is about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that was part of the idea. And I don't know, I think that tinkering with stuff and the characters that you make are the 2 biggest things that make tabletop RPGs worthwhile, worth spending all the time and energy that we do on them, is because we want to celebrate the characters we make and have fun with them.
Yeah.
And we also want to be able to customize things as we go and really feel like we're in control of the game, the system, and the story all at once.
For sure.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Maso, is there anything else that you wanted to necessarily cover about Life on the Edge?
No, I'm all good.
Okay.
I think we got a lot through.
Yeah.
I think we did a great job at covering a good deal. Not into the deep nitty-gritty. We didn't necessarily read the entire thing out loud, and that's I think is always a success.
We gotta leave something for the rest of them to find out about it.
You gotta it's nothing's for free. What is some stuff that you're working on right now? Anything you can shout out? Anything that you want to kind of promote early on?
I guess technically I would be kind of like announcing this in a way.
Ooh.
So I'm working on like 3 games at once where I'm just ADHDing between all of them, where whenever I feel like working on one of them, I jump into it.
Sure.
I already mentioned one of them on a different like stream podcast type thing. And I'm not really mentioning the other one at all as much as I can until it's very ready. But
fair enough.
This one, I'm not going to tell too much about it, but that it's a nautical fantasy game.
Oh.
And it's heavily inspired by a chapter of history that most people don't know about, which is that in the early to late, like from the 1500s to the 1600s, basically, Basque whalers were in Atlantic Canada. And they weren't trying to settle there. They were just there for the whales and just stopping by. So what ended up happening was that when French people started settling in Canada later and met some of the Algonquin-speaking people, those people started speaking Basque to them. Because the indigenous people and the Basque whalers had such a good relationship, they developed a mixed language between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
And that whole idea of like contact without colonialism, I was really excited about, and I loved reading about it. And their word that they used for each other was Aniak, which means brothers. And on top of that, to this day, one of the nations in Atlantic Canada is the Mi'kmaq people. And the Mi'kmaq people, that's not actually their original name. Their original name is Linuk. Mi'kmaq was the words that the Basques called them and they called the Basques, and it literally translates to my friends.
Oh,
That's
So-
really
that's so
interesting.
cool.
I really like that, and so I'm putting together a nautical fantasy setting with its own system that's going to focus on like interplay between these kinds of like cultures that are intersecting with each other but not destroying each other. And on top of that, that they're banding together to fight giant, horrifying sea monsters.
We do love both sea monsters and nautical settings here on this channel.
I was going to say I'm already sold. The concept of a pigeon language with sea monsters and anti-colonialism. Yeah, 100%. I'm on board. Yeah, well, it's literally as soon as you want to feature that, please. That's 1000% my shit. Any work that you're doing for Life on the Edge for Boyfriend Dungeon? Are you working on any other dungeon, any expansions, any like extra stuff on top of that, or is that kind of now just like on the back burner to see where it goes?
I think it's more on the back burner for now. I feel like if I'm going to collaborate with Kitfox again, it's probably more likely that they might ask me to give a similar treatment to a different game they've published. There have been some calls for Dwarf Fortress. I have not played enough Dwarf Fortress to do that yet. But if, for instance, Kitfox hit me up and said like something about a specific game and that I hadn't played, I would just absolutely like get as far as close as 100% as I could, and then see what I could put together. But right now, there's nothing in the works for that. We're just kind of chilling on this release and seeing where it goes from there.
Absolutely. Well, and I also, I think LD and I share this as well. Where sometimes it's just seeing where the ADHD takes you. So
Yeah.
I respect that as well. It leads to fun places.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, LD, did you have any other questions? Okay.
I had a
Maso,
great time today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for having me.
Anything else that you wanted to share, promote, or cover?
No. The only other thing I was thinking of saying, one of your like "we'll be right back" screens took care of for me. It's just
Fair enough.
I
Okay.
wanted, if I was going to do anything else, it would just be to acknowledge Gaza and what's going on in Rafah right now, and
Absolutely.
just that it needs to stop, that it's terrible, and we need some more decolonization. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Absolutely. Yes. We do have an ongoing Tiltify for the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. You can donate to that at any time. We do not currently have any incentives other than just your money goes to a great cause. So please consider doing that. That is always accessible through our beacons.ai/sword and key and all of our socials. To shout out some stuff for Maso, please check out the itch Trumoi, trumoi.itch.io. I will I'll post that here in chat once LD gets through.
Nope.
I also don't know what that one is. So
Yeah.
this is for the itch and then Tumblr as well. You can see that through our socials. You can find Boyfriend Dungeon, the video game, accessible through the Nintendo store as well as the Steam store. Definitely check that out. It is currently just $20 on Steam, and same thing on Nintendo. Yeah.
The video game is $20, I think. The
Yeah.
Correct.
tabletop RPG is just a solid like 9, I believe. 9.
Absolutely.
Mhm, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I
more to
highly
what we were
recommend
talking about.
both.
Yes.
I-
More to
I-
what we were talking
both are
about.
great.
That is the link there for the TTRPG Life on the Edge. That is $9 on DriveThruRPG. Please go show some support. It is a fantastic game and is very well written. You get 50 pages worth of fantastic art, great writing, and super cool gameplay. This is something where you could wrap this into any game that you were playing and have your characters play as weapons. You could tie this into almost any game, whether it's comedic or dramatic or horrific. Your characters turning into weapons is a cool concept. Or you could just play this game straight out and make an entire campaign out of this with friends. As we've mentioned before, if you're in a polycule, this game is basically made for you. Enjoy. For anything else, I think that is it. As LD was saying, as she's played more of the video game sounds great. I'm gonna give it a shot here once we get off, because we've got a little drive to do, and it's a perfect time to start a new game. For this TTRPG, we are going to be doing a feature of this in the near future.
On the 13th at 10 a.m. Pacific.
I will be a player, and I'm playing a German dueling shield, which is a giant two-handed shield.
Now, my understanding is this is the first time you get to play as a player?
Yes, sorry.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it is. And it's also going to be the first time, at least in one of these streams, that someone's going to be playing a shield. So
Really?
Yes. No one was being a shield before.
Oh, well.
That's a shame.
And a lot of it was random rolls. So
sure.
Yeah, that's
my own
true.
bed with that one.
Awesome. So definitely check that out. I'm going to have these lovely people say a little bit about themselves and where you can find more of them. Then I'll talk a little bit more about where you can find more Sword and Key stuff in our calendar. But again, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Maso, for joining us. Maso, if you want to do any other shout outs anywhere else that people can find you besides the stuff we already threw out, go for it.
It's just, I'm Tremoy on anything. So if you see someone with the name Tremoy, it's probably me. I have one on Reddit, although I don't use that much. I'm also on Tumblr, like I said, where I like to post memes and reblog a lot of stuff about history usually. Occasionally give my 2 cents. And mainly on itch.io. Tremoy is actually the Basque word for thunder, and a long time ago I just randomly picked it as my username. So
it's fantastic.
There you go. But that's pretty much it. I'm not super present yet online. I need to start expanding my social media presence.
Need is a strong word, but do
you're
it feels
selling
right.
something. It's
LD, where can we find more of your lovely self?
Well, hi. You can find me pretty much anywhere that's important at the Lady Dame. I am a variety Twitch streamer. I stream Mondays and sometimes Wednesdays and Fridays over on my own channel. Right now we just finished up Dragon Age 2 and we're going to be starting Inquisition on Dragon Age Inquisition next week. I am also the co-host of the amazing and fantastic podcast that I get to do with one of my dearest friends over here called Monster Crush, where we get to talk about smooching monsters. We just had an episode come out recently for the March of Madness, and we've got the next one recorded as well, where you get to hear all about the chthonic deities and my unhinged thoughts about which are the most smoochable and who should win. And one person agreed with my logic on the monsters, even though Derek looked at me like I was bonkers when I was talking about it during this podcast recording. So, it's a good time.
There's never any judgment, except I can't control what my face does sometimes. Thank you, LD. Thank you, Maso. I'm Derek Sword. I use he, him pronouns. Thank you again for joining us. I love doing this. I love doing Sword and Teas. I love chatting about amazing games and helping others to learn about the games while I'm learning about them as well. You can find me at dsword16 on most social media, but most of what I do is just retweet Sword and Keys, so I highly recommend you check out Sword and Keys stuff. You can find everything, all of our socials, all of our discount codes, all of our charity stuff, all at beacons.ai/sword-and-key. You can join our Discord there. Most of our social media is sword_and_key. That's Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. We do have discount codes. We are affiliates with Greenleaf Geek Dice. If you're looking for a new set of really cool dice or resin art or TTRPG accessories, you can find a lot of cool stuff there and get 10% off your purchase with code Sword and Key. If you were looking to get custom miniatures, you should check out Eldritch Foundry. Eldritch Foundry, if you use code Sword and Key, you can get 10% off your first purchase. Also, Eldritch Foundry has a really cool thing where you can get a subscription to print unlimited custom miniatures through your own 3D printer. So definitely check that out. It might be !EF. I'm not sure. Hey,
Sure.
that's right. Yeah, I don't know.
We got one.
It's just it's Eva's logic on it. I'm trying to figure it out. Other stuff. So we do, like I said, have a Tiltify currently open for Palestine Children's Relief Fund. Please consider donating should you be willing and able, both those qualities being important together. And again, you can find everything else Sword and Key at beacons.ai. And again, our Discord is where you're going to see most of our stuff first and foremost. It's a cool place to hang out. There's lots of cool stuff over there. And you can apply to be in games, some of which are coming up here soon. So today we did actually have to move Sword and Key's movie night, so that's actually going to be next week. But I should say tomorrow we do have a Horizon's Call returning at 3 p.m. Pacific time. That is our Nautical 5e campaign. It's 3 years ongoing. They are in a super trapped dungeon. They've only made it through one room. It is the most trapped dungeon I've ever built as a GM, and I'm very proud of it. I can't wait to see how they all get through it. Coming up on Sunday, we have the release of the next Monster Crush episode. As LD was saying, Monster Crush is a podcast that she and I do together. We talk about different cryptids, creatures, miscellaneous monsters, and how smoochable they are. This is In the March of Madness, our salty 17 single elimination bracket of Lovecraftian monsters. And there's a lot of tentacles and a lot of things that are impossible to look at. And it's just, I can't help what my face does as LD tries to logic her way through slime and devastation. And we got to the end, and I will be posting our bracket here.
I stand by my decisions, all of them.
Just listen. It's going to be great. LD and I also do something else with our friend Shadow on Tuesdays.
Oh, that's right.
Tuesdays,
we do that. I forgot about that.
Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific time, we play Baldur's Gate 3 right here on Sword and Key with Gate Night, where the three of us are working our way through the Forgotten Realms in the most haphazard way possible. It is also a very important day, a holiday, some might say, on the 12th. That is Friday. It is LD's birthday. So please show a little celebration for that.
Thank
yeah.
you. I know it's so close now.
National holiday. Yeah, you should ask. Everybody should ask for work off. It's important. The 12th will also be our next Sword and Key movie night. Typically, those are every other week, but I have to be somewhere tonight. So this was in celebration of Gona's birthday. Now, technically in celebration of LD's birthday. We'll be watching the 1977 Hobbit movie on our Discord.
Ooh, can we add Last Unicorn to that, since it's my birthday too?
Yeah, the Last Unicorn, it was actually going to play on the 3rd.
But it's my birthday.
But yeah, we'll move the last. We'll do a double feature. Absolutely, I'll find something else for that. So it'll be the Hobbit and the Last Unicorn playing on the 12th. Horizon's will be back every week on Saturdays. Gate Night plays every week on Tuesdays. Also on the 13th, I believe, was the game feature. It's not on the calendar yet, but for Life on the Edge. So check that out. On the 14th, we have our next Sword and Key with Sword and Tea with Pandian Games. So I will be hosting that one. We're going to be talking about one of their newest games, which is a sci-fi feature that I don't have the name of in front of me right now, unfortunately. I think it's Substrata something. Again, I'm not prepared. Our next movie night, besides the Hobbit Last Unicorn double feature, is going to be Kiki's Delivery Service, as we are doing our monthly Ghibli movie watch. And then again, Monster Crush features every other week. So the next episode, besides the one coming out on Sunday, will come out on the 21st. We will have more applications for games out soon. Some games will be coming back in the near future. We are currently in talks to bring Humblewood back for a season 2, and we'll have lots more applications out. Again, the first place to see those is Discord. Second place is social media. So check out Discord first. Let's see. I believe that is it for today. So yeah, thank you all again. We're gonna let you go. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed a nice cup of tea during this. We will catch you next time, next Sword and Tea again on the 14th, but plenty more in the meantime. So take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.
All right, toodaloo. Say bye.
Everyone.